of all, let me just welcome all of you. And we're really very gratified with the huge response. It's causing us technical problems, but we were really very gratified with the number of folks who said, you know what, this is a really important area for us to look at. And so we're really pleased about that, and we hope that you'll be able to get a few practical ideas that can help you in really addressing some of the most serious issues that we're addressing at this time. And the social isolation of many of our clients can be a very daunting challenge. So I'm Tony Salerno. I've been in the field for about 40 years or so. So the lens I'm going to be looking at with much of the, this presentation today is really having come from both an experience as being a clinician, working with families, working with adults with serious mental illness and or substance use difficulties, both inpatient and outpatient. And I'm hoping to kind of share some ideas that will be helpful to you. Let me turn it over to Dr. Margulies, who will also tell you a little bit about himself.
Thank you, Tony, and hello, everybody. I'm Paul Margulies. I'm a clinical psychologist, and I am an associate director of the Center for Practice Innovations at Columbia Psychiatry, and we're located at New York State Psychiatric Institute. I'll turn things over to Ruth.
Wagner, and I'm with NIAPRS. And I'm the Director of Training and Development, and I've been there since 2014, and I've actually been in the field for 34 years. So, yeah, I'm very happy to be with you.
Well, if I add up all of our years, it's probably somewhere around 150 years of experience. Okay. So here's the agenda for today. We're not going to spend a lot of time on trying to define what social isolation is and why it's important, but we want to frame that. And then, so how do you actually assess the needs of clients who may be really struggling with this particular unprecedented time? Also strategies, some practical strategies, and some examples of things that you may consider in thinking about how you would address this serious issue. And then one very, very important part of this is generating novel ideas from you. We already know, there are perhaps some academic kinds of like examples or ideas that you should consider, but so many of the important ideas come from you. We're in a period of a lot of brainstorming, and what we're hoping to do is to invite all of you to share some of the approaches you're taking that could be of use to others, and then we'll do a brief Q&A at the end. So it's about 45 minutes before we get to the Q&A, and we'll leave about 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So this area of social isolation, and what is it and why it's important? I was really thinking about this in terms of if I were in your shoes, those of you who are practitioners now, when I was working with adults with serious mental illness, and I already knew for many of my clients, one of the challenges was really social connections. It's one of the consequences of serious mental illness, substance use problems, is that at times you can become disconnected from both friends, from family, and your community around you. And that was an area that I was always helping my clients address. And I was just trying to imagine how difficult it would be in these situations when, for many, the lifeline was the program that we were running. The lifeline was me. And in the absence of having that kind of like support and structure, I was just saying to myself, well, how difficult it might be to manage some of the most serious symptoms and challenges and difficulties associated with mental illness or substance use. So I think that was how I was connecting to this. And perhaps many of you are connecting with it in the same way. And Ruth, you have some thoughts about this as well.
What really struck me was several years ago, I think it was 2018, when the United Kingdom created for the very first time a Minister of Loneliness, and, obviously that entire department. And they actually responded pretty quickly, because that was as a result of a 2017 survey, and they found out that, where's the number? 9 million people in the UK reported as often or always feeling lonely. So they're really taking a public health approach. And that connects with why are they doing this? Why would a government do this, a healthcare system, on such a wide scale? And we sort of see the wide scale now in terms of social distancing, and they did it years ago in the opposite direction. Campaign after campaign, trying to get people together to reduce loneliness and to help make and form those social connections. form and reform those social connections. And in the United States, we used to do that, not used to do that to that grand scale. What I'm speaking to is Dr. Vivek Murthy, our previous Surgeon General under the Obama administration. He was and is very interested in loneliness and the direct impact that loneliness has on physical health. And so, as you see here, I mean, this shocked me to no end, that loneliness has the same impact on mortality as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And so the UK found that it's not just physical and mental health. You have to address social.
Great. Thank you so much, Ruth.
And Tony, one other thing I would add here. Please. You know, we've been in touch with so many programs and so many agencies in the course of the past several weeks, and it's just been amazing and impressive to see how quickly you all have pivoted to a very different way of doing business. You know, telehealth, which is a word we barely knew a few months ago, is now the way we're all operating. And, you know, there's a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation going on, but also a lot of concerns. And among the things we're concerned about certainly are about risks and about keeping people safe and making sure people's symptoms are under control. One of the points we want to make with this webinar today is we don't want to lose sight of this issue of social isolation. It is incredibly important. And if anything, it's under threat more today, given the givens, than it was even a few weeks ago. So if we come away with a sense that this is also an important thing to be inquiring about and facilitating, you know, some progress with, that would be a good thing.
Yeah, and you know, Paul, I'm really very gratified by the response. We have never seen any offering where it generated 3,000 registrants. And what that's telling us is that there's a huge recognition in the system for those practitioners out there that the social isolation cause that's contributing to this unprecedented crisis is something that's critically important to address. Yeah. So thanks very much. So, Paul, I'm going to turn this over to you.
Sure. So we want to start with a polling question. And on, I believe, the right side of your screen, you will see the poll. And the question is, in light of the current COVID-19 crisis, to what degree do you routinely explore and address social isolation in discussions with the people receiving services? And you see there's 5 options there: always, frequently, sometimes, rarely, never. If you can please take the next 30 seconds or 45 seconds and just, you know, tell us where you're currently at with this. And then we will share the results.
It just takes just a few moments. We appreciate your patience on this.
Yeah, we want to get a sense of where things currently are for you with this issue.
Some folks, it looks like they're kind of chatting in their response. And hopefully in a few moments, we'll have a sense of what the overall picture looks like. You know, we have so many hundreds of respondents.
Mm-hmm.
It may take a little bit longer than usual.
You know, while we're waiting, I think it's so important for us to query the audience about this question, because even before the COVID-19 and the social distancing and social isolation, it was considered a public health crisis, right? And so now, you know, with social distancing on top of that, I can just imagine how lonely people are out there.
Oh, my. Oh, my. I see we have results. And we've had many, many people vote. And so just the way, and I think that our participants can see this as well, but if not, I'll very quickly read them. 14% of the people said always, 29% said frequently, 15% said sometimes, 5% rarely, and 1% never. So it's skewed in the direction of more rather than less frequent.
Terrific. Well, no, we really appreciate you guys responding to that. And as as you're looking at some of these, well, there are folks who really, this could be a very important issue to kind of bring to the sort of the top of the table in terms of priorities. So thanks very much, folks, for sharing that. So, you know, in terms of looking at isolation, like where do you really begin, right? And so here are just some simple questions that you may consider. You know, I kind of think about if I were in your situation right now when I was working with people with serious mental illness, I mean, one of the things I'd be concerned about is the issues around medication, right? How are they doing with their particular nature of the particular mental health difficulties? What were some of the maybe concrete challenges that they were experiencing in living alone? And you know, you might find yourself focusing on that particular area, and may perhaps kind of miss sort of thorough exploration of the degree of that person's social isolation and opportunities to connect with others. So here is just an example of some questions that you might consider. I mean, one of the things that we hope happens is that at the end of this, the very next client that you see, if this is not an area that you've been exploring deeply, that you might consider opening up your conversation with your client with some of these questions. So who have you spoken to in the past week? By phone, text, email, and video chat. You know, in the UK, they found nearly 200,000 people hadn't had a conversation with anyone in the last couple of weeks. Like, that's sort of amazing. And we have no sense of that with many of our clients. So that would be one of the questions you could ask. When was the last time you spoke to someone? Who was it? Did that person reach out to you, or did you reach out to that person? Do you expect to talk to someone today or in the next several days? Can you imagine if someone says, no, I don't really plan to speak to, I'm going to have no one to talk to today or tomorrow or maybe in this week? That would be a very important issue to identify. How comfortable are you with the amount of contact you have? So you want to get a sense from the person's felt need around wanting more contact or less contact. Would you like to be better connected with anyone? Would you like to have more contact with people? If you ever feel really upset and worried, this is really important. What would you do? Who would you reach out to? You know, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're really upset, right? Or something is really disturbing you. Like the things we all do to kind of manage our current difficulties and just our life difficulties and challenges we have. How much we rely on other people to be a great source of support to all of us. Do you keep in touch with others through social media? And are you in touch with your family? Would you like more contact with them? That's another particularly important thing. You know, these days, and I remember when Paul and I were working together, you know, it was a time in the 80s and 90s where reaching out to families and engaging and involving families was really quite common, was a major emphasis. And what we've noticed and observed in the last few years, less of that. So that might be also a topic to open up, to have a discussion with your clients about. There's also, if you want to do things more formally, there are always, of course, some professional assessments around loneliness. And this is just an example. We're going to provide you with the link to that so that if you wanted to take a look at what has been developed more within the scientific field, that you'd have an opportunity to do that. But this issue of loneliness and social isolation is taking on a much greater high priority in terms of recognition of its role in a person's overall emotional and physical well-being. So, Paul?
So thank you, Tony. So there are 5 strategies to address social isolation that we've identified. So I'm going to just quickly walk you through these, and then we're going to follow this up with a bunch of examples of each of these to give you at least some feel for what we're talking about. First strategy is contacting people you work with and contacting them regularly on an individual basis, reaching out. Second, disseminating reliable information and resources. Third, helping people identify and connect with their social network. Who are those people out there? How do I reach them? How do I stay in touch with them? Who do I want to be in touch with? Fourth is helping and encouraging people to think of and reach out to their families as support systems. And finally, creating virtual online communities. And we have a number of examples of that we're going to share with you. Okay.
Well, I just want to sort of emphasize the area around families. Some of your clients are living with families. Some of your clients may be living alone or some roommates, but also have connections with families. And that might be an area that has been under-recognized And so one of our things that we would want you to consider is to have a better understanding of where that individual is embedded within a social network, including their family system. And there may be opportunities, and it might be a little bit unusual that if you have someone living with family, the degree to which those family members might be engaged in part of your work, which may offer some opportunities that could really benefit the health and the recovery of the clients you work with. Ruth?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you brought that up. What it makes me think about is a person can still be lonely even when they're in a house full of people, or they could be living on their own without anyone around them and perfectly content. So bringing in, the conversation with the person receiving services about family, about who their relationships are, about who they want to connect to. So I really appreciated that.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that you brought that
Makes a
up.
big impact.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is the kind of conversations that we engage our clients in around this issue.
Right. So what you see on your screen are examples, and we have 3 or 4 slides of these examples. And this actually came out of research that my executive director, Harvey Rosenthal, from the New York Association of Psychiatric Rehabilitation Services, long name, he queried people from around the nation and basically asked them, with all these changes and COVID-19 and social distancing, how are you providing services? And he received a tremendous response, and it was shared at his webinar last week. Let me see what the name of it, Taking on the Challenge of Working Remotely. And so he shared some of these examples of what was shared with him. And so what you'll notice as we go through these slides is that there's a paramount theme here of keeping people connected to your services. So the whole orientation piece, how are services changing, for example? And then, of course, there's the added connecting people to other people, addressing the relationships and the loneliness. So first here you see daily outreach calls and essentially conducting that needs assessment that Tony, those questions that he shared with us, and the UCLA assessment. All those are just very simple questions to slowly elicit from people their thoughts and their feelings about their current circumstances. And then one of the other things that I love is mailing out resources. Yes, the old-fashioned way, mailing out resources, and then, of course, using technology, posting updates on, the organization's website or on their Facebook page, sending out newsletters.
Yeah, Ruth, let me ask you, how could that be helpful? Mailing out resources or putting postings. In what way might that help?
When you talk about keeping people engaged, not just in services, but in life, right? So having services with you, that's a big part of a person's life, and it's very important to them. So for a provider to be able to constantly be in contact and provide updates, a person needs to be oriented to the world around them. That way it reduces anxiety. They're not thinking, well, is the doctor ever going to see me? Or is my therapist ever going to see me? Am I ever going back? So it's about the orientation to the changes.
And, to add to that, for those individuals, who are using social media, being aware of how to use social media and where to connect with others and how to connect with others can make all the difference in the world here.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right. And then, of course, Paul spoke to teleservices, and so you need to communicate with the people receiving services, how you're going to do business differently. And I love the next one. Check in with people who struggle with technology. A lot of us do. And it's important, to connect with them and say, this is how we're going to communicate with you. You can go to our Facebook page. We're going to keep that updated. Or you can go to our website. We'll keep you updated. And on top of all that, I'll be calling you, so that they have an orientation and they learn the technology so that they can be independent and search on their own. What I found really fascinating was sending a link to free cognitive games. And we know that loneliness is connected to reduced cognitive functioning. And so this is just a perfect idea. Find what's free and send it to them so that they could actually engage in these puzzles and exercises that are actually very good for the promotion of their brain health.
It's interesting,
and then
Ruth,
supporting them.
Ruth, it's interesting you bring that up because one of the things we hadn't really mentioned is boredom. The impact that boredom has on individuals. That can be one of the most stressful experiences. It's like, what do I do with 24/7 in terms of like time? And this is sort of like anything that kind of can reach out to help people to kind of structure their time in doing activities so that the social disconnection isn't as painful, so that in some way people keep themselves occupied. So I think that was an interesting point that you made.
And boredom leads to depression, leads to feeling lonely, or boredom leads to loneliness, which also leads to depression. It's all connected. So the next one is just to help the people you work with to identify and reach out to their own social network, and maybe even to reconnect with people who used to be a support for them and are no longer. So we could help them through those painful moments and coach them through how to reconnect with the people they've lost contact with.
Ruth, if I can just add to that, the idea of reaching out is something that for many people will be something they may not have done for a while. Because oftentimes, if I'm accustomed to connecting with people in a time and a place, I don't have to reach out quite so much because I know if I show up to that time and place, I'll see people. Under these circumstances, it really does take some proactive, you really need to take some control over it. And I think introducing that idea is very important, really, for all of us at this point.
Great.
Okay, so more ideas. Pulling together mobile support networks, and they may include Zoom groups. I don't know anybody else. Prior to a month ago, I had never been on Zoom. I live on Zoom right now. And so, helping people that we work with, to become part of Zoom group conferences or FaceTime calls or Facebook messaging, using various social media, texting, the warm line services, direct phone contact. And some of this might be helping the person understand how to use that technology. For many of us, myself included, this isn't the world that I was a part of, very actively. So that's a part of it as well. Another example, updating agency websites and social media pages to talk about the transition to tele-delivered peer support services and to provide links that allow clients to join peer support groups at their typically scheduled hours. And finally, on this slide, to identify the challenges that we know so many people are experiencing related to income and loss of job and food and shelter. And an example there that this particular individual gave us was assist in identifying food pantry delivery resources. Okay, Tony?
Yes. Well, also the idea of, we know a lot of these examples were not just made up. NIAPRA's collected and compiled these through the work of organizations around the country. Ruth, do I have that right?
Yes, you do.
Yeah, and so that was a great contribution, is what are people doing? And we're going to get a chance to reach out to you and get a sense of what you're doing. Mm-hmm. You can kind of add to this huge increasing list of things that organizations and practitioners could consider as a potential benefit in addressing social isolation. So some organizations have figured out a way, whether it's through Zoom or some other platform, to hold some virtual groups. And that's a very, very strong intervention to try to address the issue of social isolation, or developing virtual open just support groups that are outside of, let's say, structured type of clinical groups. Exploring the role of peers. People always wonder and consider, so what are some of the roles that peers can perform at any time? But in this particular time, that can be often a very, very powerful role in reaching out and helping isolated clients really stay connected. The other is, this is true for like peers and others, of having some easy access to supervision, really for all staff. What that really says is, it isn't as if here are the 10 things you guys could do and that'll fix it. That's not the reality of the world. The world is one today in which we're constantly involved in creative problem solving, of generating some new ideas, and having staff and supervisors and others have an opportunity to step back and think about approaches to address particularly the most vulnerable clients that you are serving. For some organizations, they are really looking at 24/7 access to counselors, peer mentors, recovery specialists, psychiatry. Now, why is that so important? You can imagine how difficult it can be, how terrifying, how panic-stricken individuals may get 2 o'clock in the morning, where they're worried about either getting coronavirus illness, worrying about death. If they're having access to a lot of the information, it can be really very overwhelming. And just knowing that you could be connected to another person who could be a support to you, that often, just that alone, can help people get through some of the most difficult periods. The issue of self-disclosing. The issue of self-disclosing is an issue in, Paul, as psychologists, social workers, that comes up all the time. When should you disclose? When you shouldn't disclose? How do you disclose to make sure that it's in the service of that client's goals? And this is one of those times, one of those unusual times when we're all in it together. And this can be an opportunity for practitioners to disclose in a way that is normalizing, because sometimes individuals who've had a lot of mental health issues, struggles in their lives, may attribute some of their reactions to this crisis as just being part of, well, I have a psychiatric problem. This is also an opportunity for normalizing.
Normalize, Tony, and validate.
And validate. That's a very good point, Paul, to add that. And so that might be something to consider to the degree, because some oftentimes have a very rigid rules around never self-disclosing. Others may disclose in a way that may not be as helpful to clients, but this is one that you might want to consider as well. And then positive affirmations. I discovered this in work I was doing with a resiliency curriculum that was organized at the end of each session. Individuals were given like a positive affirmation, sort of a self-statement that you can really get through this, that you have the knowledge, you have the ability, you have had past experiences where you've handled difficult situations, as a way of having positive affirmations. There's actually a lot of work on the role of positive affirmations in helping people to maintain morale and to give them confidence to get through difficult situations or to try something new. And so that might be something to consider. And one thought was, through even text messaging, being able to send people either inspiring quotes, inspiring messages, positive affirmation messages that can really be of some value. So again, we're just throwing out a lot of ideas, putting them on the table so that we have as broad a set of possibilities as possible.
So one of the things that I find really interesting is that we really need to address the increasing of a person's emotional distress. As this continues to get extended and extended, because it's just been extended another 2 weeks, people will get distressed. And speaking to what Tony said about normalizing the experience, I mean, this is an unprecedented time, and it affects every single one of us. So it's a wonderful opportunity to say, yes, I am going through similar things. My family is, we all are, but remember your resiliency. And so we know that recovery is not always linear. People have had many successes in their past, and that's a wonderful opportunity to remind them of that they are resilient and they will make it through this as well, that you all will, we all will, right? So the next thing I want to talk about is mindfulness exercises. And I love mindfulness exercises because, well, number one, I find them useful, and I was not a convert until like a year ago. But I find them very useful, and at NIAPRS, we do them every single day, and you'll find it on our homepage so that you can take part of that. But we do them in our management meetings, and you teach someone mindfulness. They can choose to use it or not use it, but that's something that would provide them with the independence to do that themselves, any place, any time. You teach them, and then it will last for them a lifetime, if that's something that they're interested in.
So Ruth,
yes.
Ruth, where could they find some tips on these mindfulness exercises?
Well, it's all over the internet, seriously. But if you go to the NIAPRS homepage, NIAPRS, NYAPRS.org, There's a mindfulness exercise every single day. You'll see a beach scene. You just click on that, and it takes you to the day's recording. And I strongly encourage, the initial idea was for the workforce, during this time, but I strongly encourage you to show your, the people that you work with, show them how to access this on their own so that when they're home, they've got that they can look at, and it could help, they would learn the exercises that way.
Yeah, I'm seeing a question asking for you to please repeat that website.
Oh, sure. NYAPRS.org. NYAPRS.org. And so actually the next thing on this slide here is Strive for 5 Challenge. And this is an initiative created by NYAPRS and the Coalition of Behavioral Health in New York. And the challenge is really, really simple, and it addresses loneliness, and it builds connections. And it says all New Yorkers, whether you have a mental illness or not, doesn't matter, all New Yorkers reach out to 5 people every single day for 30 days. And in that way, you're building connections and you're helping people not to be lonely. And of course, reaching out means reaching out in any way, using the telephone, using Zoom, using Facebook, even texting and what have you, FaceTime. Any way you can think about, digital or not, paper, old-fashioned way, through the mail, say, I'm thinking of you, miss you. All these things that we can do to keep us all connected and keep us all strong during this time.
Ruth, you just reminded me of something here. This particular approach, what it emphasizes is instead of viewing this as the client, the folks who are socially isolated, that they need to be the recipients of connections, right?
That's
Here
right.
is one who is saying you can be the person who connects to others. You can provide support to others. It kind of like tries to shift it away from the person who may experience themselves in being in a passive, receptive kind of recipient perspective, as opposed to I can be a contributor. I can be a support to other people. And I think that could be also a very powerful message as well. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. We all need to be needed, and we all want to have a purpose and participate in society. So that's perfect.
Thank you. Great.
All right. I actually think that this is me. We want to open up the floor to you now. And the question, when you answer, please make sure to use the chat box and that it's addressed to all panelists. And the question is, in what creative ways have you addressed social isolation? So we just talked about a few creative ways of organizations around the nation, and we'd like to hear what you're doing. And, you could even share with us what you're doing on an individual practitioner level or what programmatic-wise what's being done.
Yeah, we know you're doing a lot of creative things out there, innovative things that among those of us on the panel we never would have thought of. So we'd love to hear from you and share what you're doing.
Yeah. One popped up that says Zoom happy hours. That's great. Zoom for support groups, group texting with her coworkers. That's wonderful because it's our mental health too, right? 12, Zoom lunch with coworkers. That's great. Zoom birthday party, virtual coffee breaks, digital dancing parties, online poetry slams. I've asked a person to ask me what's inside their household to keep them entertained. And I think what I saw there was that they're using FaceTime to be able to have those conversations. Video chat bingo. There's so many things here.
Look at this.
Daily
Look at all these ideas coming up.
up.
Look at this. It's wonderful.
Wow. Facebook workouts and having a workout buddy, Netflix parties, rainbow hunt. I don't know what that is, but sounds fun. Zumba. This is all wonderful stuff. Plantings, virtual video games.
I just saw one virtual museum tours, and I know the Botanic Gardens in the Bronx have a virtual garden tour.
Wow.
Live concerts with different artists. Yes, they are doing those. Baltic Street, Bronx, looking at staff wellness, enlightening the mood and through virtual Jeopardy.
I have some coming in saying that they created a blog for their program participants where they share tips on maintaining mental health and addressing social isolation.
Great, great. Some of
Games
my
virtual
clients are
games
doing
with
home
coworkers.
improvements. People are putting rainbow pictures in their windows for people to find out when they're walking or driving around. That's interesting.
Virtual.
Sort of like code.
Now,
someone's saying reach out.
so
Don't just sit at home.
There's
There's
so
a
much.
lot of things that's happening.
Yeah. Now, we're going to collect this information, curate it, and then have it available for folks. Because we could spend the next 2 hours, I think, just reading what's coming in, which is fantastic.
It's a lot of fun to see how creative people are.
Yeah. And what we notice so much is that you're trying to create opportunities for people to have social connections. And many of them is bringing clients together, folks that you're working with, to begin to have either some shared experiences. That's like fantastic. And
you see the one listening to relaxing music together with the people receiving services. That's great.
That's great.
There's also one that came in saying they had lunch with their client via video, and they just had music playing.
Oh, I love that.
Wow.
Enjoyed lunch together.
That's fantastic.
We were hoping when we planned this online meeting that you folks would be willing to share some creative ideas. I mean, I think you've knocked it out of the park here.
Oh, I would say so.
And we look forward to, as Tony says, curating this, pulling it together, and getting it out to you, because there are tons of great ideas I think we can steal from one another.
And I like that there's a combination of how people are taking care of themselves as a staff and as a team, and also how they're taking care of and participating and bringing in the people receiving services, helping them.
Ruth, that's so important.
So
important to be taking care of ourselves as well. The self-care, so important.
You know, I do rely on, we do our, at NYU and McSilver and CTAC, we have every week a Zoom kind of meeting. And I really look forward to it. It is really important, kind of staying connected, folks. So, and I think folks recognize that the issue of social isolation or social distancing and disconnection can affect all of us.
Yeah, Tony, we're doing some team huddles literally every morning with some of our teams, and in a very interesting way, we're better connected now than we had been in the past.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Wow, people are so thoughtful about some of these things, and there's just so many wonderful ideas. It's hard to process them as they come along, but we do want to give.
There's so many
folks. Yeah. Any other things that seem to pop up, Ruth or Lydia, that you see?
There's so many great things here. Reaching out to youth centers to see if they're doing anything. Supervision over video chat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was what you were speaking to before.
It seems like virtually anything we can do in real life can be done virtually.
Right, as it turns out.
Yeah, I'm just watching these posts here.
Great. So many.
Before, I used to be concerned with my son in the same room with all his friends, and each of them on their phones. And so they were together, but not really socializing. And now you've got where social media really has been able to keep us all connected.
Yeah. I'm seeing one person asked how they'll get this list. Is this something that will go on a website or we'll email to them, or do we know quite yet?
Yes, we can compile all the recommendations and get it posted with the slides when we post it on the CTAC NY website.
Oh, terrific.
So people will get the slide, will have because many people have been asking for a copy of the slide deck. So slides will have this curated sort of compilation of all the things that folks have chatted in, and that'll be should be available.
One person here says that's. I just want to finish up with this one.
Sure.
One person here says that a person they work with is interested in do-it-yourself projects, so they've been providing them with simple do-it-yourself projects so that they could, be busy and enjoy themselves at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty wonderful.
So, at this point, we got all this, and please continue typing in and sharing with us. We also wanted to give an opportunity for you guys to type in any questions you have as well.
And Tony, I think we also have one more polling question.
Oh,
Right.
Let me I'm trying to get to the next slide. I think you're right. Yes. All right, Paul.
Yeah. So while people are typing up, if you can take just 30 seconds and answer this question, which is kind of similar to the one we asked before, but now it's based on the conversation we've had for the past 45 minutes. How likely are you to address social isolation with the people you work with? Very likely, likely, unlikely, or very unlikely. And somewhere on your screen, I think it's on the right, you're going to see the polling question. Just take 30 seconds, tell us your answer, and in a couple of minutes, we'll see what you all say. At the same time,
I see
please
some of
feel
the
free to
answers
type.
are coming through. Some of the answers are coming through chat, but if you could just actually put that into the poll directly, that would be helpful.
Outstanding. In the meantime, if people have any questions you want to type up, that's okay. That's absolutely okay as well.
I think the point of this particular poll question is, based on having this conversation, how likely are you to make this a major focus, of your work, and really have this maybe go a little bit higher in terms of your priority with respect to ensuring that you explore this with all the clients really that you work with.
Okay, we've got some results.
That's terrific. That's terrific.
Almost half, 48% of the people said very likely. 11% said likely, 1% said unlikely.
That matches up with what I'm seeing in the chat box of those people who use the chat box to answer this. A lot of A's, which is very likely, one B, that is likely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay, great.
So if we nudged you just a little bit to put this higher on your list, I'm happy.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if we, I kind of think of it, do we do such nudging as you guys were already kind of nudging yourselves?
Yeah.
And based on all your, responses. And we just kind of collectively came together. I think that's energizing when we know so many people around the state are really sort of addressing this issue and coming up with a whole host of ideas to make this work and have really set this as a high priority. And we're really pleased that you view this as something that you will continue to do. Maybe in the very next session that you have, 10 minutes after this particular presentation closes, when you're speaking to a client, that this might be in an area that you explore in addition to all the other things that you need to explore as well. So let's have some questions at this point. Any Q&A if folks would like to type in.
So in your chat box, please type in your questions.
And this is a very, very active group, so we're going to have many more questions that we'll be able to, to answer. But we'll try to answer a few that come in.
Person says she's heard a lot of great ideas and she wishes that she could incorporate Zoom and video conferencing with the people she works with, but most don't have computers or smartphones.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think what happens is that we're kind of revert to old technology called, even though land phone, if we can. If having any connection that way is really difficult, then you use even a older method of wanting to keep in touch by even mail. It's just the idea of we haven't forgotten about you. I think that's an important statement. Right. You may feel very alone. You may feel very isolated. You may feel like you're kind of really forgotten. And it's so critically important for us to communicate you're not forgotten. And whatever channel is still available, if high tech doesn't do it, then we go to low tech.
No, you're right, Tony. The method isn't nearly as important as the message here. The other thing I just have to add, I don't know about others, I have spent more time on the telephone in the past month than I have in years, and there's something very rewarding about hearing somebody's voice. Yeah.
I have a great question that came in. What if the person receiving services doesn't have support systems? Their families are living in a shelter.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. I think the first thing is to explore very, very carefully and thoroughly the degree to which there is a support system. I think at times, unless we look really very carefully and make that as a high priority part of an assessment, we may miss out on what are some possible supports that may not really have come to mind. So I think that that's an important step. But let's assume you do that and the person feels very, very disconnected, their homes, whatever the situation might be, then it's us. You know, in my mind, I say, well, then it's me. Then I'm the connection. You know, whoever is available. So if I can't access and mobilize some, quote, natural supports in the person's life, then I think that, you know, there's a greater responsibility that falls on the provider system, right? The service system, to be a lifeline to that individual. There's no other, I don't think there's any magic answer to that very difficult question. But I have had the experience that I made some assumptions about the person's lack of any kind of like social connection. And then when you kind of really spend some serious time exploring it deeply, then you may discover there may be some opportunities that one didn't acknowledge or recognize. Maybe somebody in the shelter program itself, maybe a family member. You just never know until you do it deeply. And if you come to the conclusion that there ain't much to work with here, then I think it falls on us.
And
you know, there are a lot of
nothing.
coming
And if
in.
it's us, it's not nothing.
I'm sorry.
It's significant.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. The
So
worst
the next
is
question.
completely alone. Yes, go ahead, Ruth.
I'm sorry. Just looking at all these questions coming in.
Sure.
Can you develop vicarious trauma through virtual sessions?
Yeah, I mean, at any time you have an interaction with others, and part of what that conversation is about is some really serious and overwhelming adversity that person has experienced, and you're empathically in touch with that person's distress and discomfort, I think yes. I think I don't think we just get affected by this when we're in, you know, face-to-face contact. In fact, that person's degree of isolation may make the whatever adversity they experience so much more difficult to handle. So I don't think the virtual approach is going to mitigate that, you know, at all. The good news is that vicarious trauma tends to be less likely to occur. People are more likely to experience compassion fatigue, where they're just feeling a little overwhelmed and emotionally exhausted, or, you know, like a burnout type of thing. But any human contact, I think, raises the same issue around how we emotionally respond to it.
It's not actually a question, a comment, and it speaks to the assessing a person's level of loneliness and connectivity. But it says, I ask the people I work with where they typically spend who they typically spend the holidays with, in order to get a sense of how, you know, important a support system they have.
That's a great question. You can also ask who contacts you on your birthday. Who do you receive a birthday card? You know, if you're running out of a few dollars, who might you call? So yeah, there's a lot of questions that would get at a sense of to what degree is this person really connected to other people? And that was a great question that the person commented on.
There's another here about HIPAA concerns, utilizing social media, which is interesting.
Yeah, well,
and privacy issues.
Yeah, that one confuses me. So I don't know if Paul or Ruth have any other thoughts, or Lydia have any thoughts on that. I know that at CTAC and at MICTAC, we have been trying to address some of those issues, you know, related to HIPAA, and the state is taking some role, and the federal government taking some role in, you know, in order to be able to facilitate the services and the work virtually, that some of the HIPAA regulations needed to be examined a little more closely. But I don't know the exact details about that.
Yeah, and I think it's evolving. I mean, this is all a very brand new situation for all of us. But I have also seen from the government level, you know, a desire to re-examine some assumptions about how to operate, you know, in this world right now.
Right. you know,
Yeah,
just
and I encourage you to check
Go ahead, Ruth.
out on
Lydia?
our CTAC homepage. We have a COVID resource page that includes any OMH guidance that has been released, as well as additional tip sheets on technology and things like that. It's my understanding that there are some platforms like Doxy that has been used for a long time doing telehealth. So, you know, kind of really exploring the different options available would probably be a good idea.
Great. Yeah, I'm aware of the time. I just want to, let's go to the next, I'm going to go to the next slide just to let you know some of the upcoming events. Lydia, you want to just kind of just share very quickly what some of the
Sure.
opportunities are?
So we have a few webinars coming up, again, related to the current circumstances. So we have doing work telephonically, particularly for a family, I think youth peer support providers, how to do this work with families on April 8th. We have a convo with Dr. Tony, where Tony is going to talk with Dr. Bonanno, who is an expert on resilience, to talk through some ideas around applying some of that work to what you're doing now in the current circumstances. We also have a best practices in mental health webinar with children and adolescents scheduled on the 15th. We also have a couple other ones coming down the pipe, so stay tuned for those announcements as well. And just, you know, as a reminder, the slides for this webinar recording, I know some of you asked for the UCLA scale. You can also Google that. It's out there. It'll also be listed on the slides. So you can check ctacny.org in about a day or probably 2 days to get access to the recording and the slides. Okay. I think we're about ready to wrap up.
Yes, yes.
I just would like to share that I'm getting a lot of thank yous, and facilitators should know. There's a lot of thank yous.
We appreciate that. We appreciate the fact that you've taken time out of your incredibly busy schedules to spend this time with us.
And you guys have been wonderful contributors to this presentation. So we're very much gratified by the level of interest and support, and wishing you guys the very best. And please take a moment to fill out the feedback survey. And we hopefully will see you again soon in some of the other offerings that we have from really the partners from NIAPRS and Center for Practice Innovations and CTAC. Stay well, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Thank
wishing
you all.
the best.
Everybody.
Take care, everybody.
Be healthy.
Bye-bye.
Healthy.
Stay safe.